All right, so far we start talking on Bitcoin. We looked at the Bitcoin structure, specifications, its blocks, and then wallet software. So we talk about how we create a Bitcoin account and so, wallet addresses. Now we are going to talk about sending cryptocurrencies to these wallet addresses. So we start with transactions. A transaction can be in either one of two states, spent or unspent. This is important because this is actually the main difference between the Bitcoin blockchain and the traditional database. Because in a traditional database, for instance, think about your money in your bank. If you transfer 100 Turkish liras, they just subtract that amount of money from your total balance. But in Bitcoin, you don't have a total balance actually. All of the Bitcoins you receive for your address actually stored on the blockchain on different blocks. So your wallet software actually traverses all of these transactions and say that in total you have this amount of money. So your balance actually calculated by your wallet software. So, and in order to do this in a fast way, actually we keep transactions as spent or unspent. Because if you half spend something, then these calculations will be really hard. So if you have, for instance, 5 Bitcoins, you cannot say that I'm only transferring 2 of them and the remaining 3 stays there. You cannot say that. You cannot half spend it. So your input should be all of the 5 Bitcoins, and you want to send 2 of them to somebody. So you write that as an output, you are sending 2 Bitcoins to that address. Then the difference, the 3 Bitcoins, actually must be returned to you. So you write either your old address or you create a new one and also transfer it. So this way, the old transaction now becomes spent, okay? Of course, you can write input and output as the same amount. So initially in my example, we had 5 Bitcoins, and as an output, we wrote 5 Bitcoins as 2 plus 3. But if you create such a transaction, this means that you are not paying any fees. In theory, you can do that, but actually your output should be a little bit less than your input, and the difference will be collected by the miner. Yes, you cannot spend part of a transaction. In theory, a transaction can be performed without a fee. This means that your input and output are identical. However, relay fee of 1 Satoshi per byte means that nodes will not notify other nodes about transaction with fee less than 1 Satoshi per byte. So 1 Satoshi is a very small amount of Bitcoin. And if you create a transaction and the amount of money you are paying as a fee, which you determine by yourself, is less than 1 Satoshi per byte, this means that when you create the transaction, it is maybe 1,300 bytes and so. Okay, for that case, you have to determine how many Satoshis you are paying per byte. So if it is less than 1 Satoshi per byte, generally nodes do not notify other nodes when you create such a transaction. So this means that most probably your transaction will not be performed. Okay, so but if you want it to be definitely included in the current block, so you can increase this number, and this way miners will put it as the first transaction in their block when they are mining it. So again, in theory, you can say 0 Satoshi per byte, but generally nodes will not notify other nodes. But if you're a miner yourself, you can include your transaction when you are mining. So you can really perform a Bitcoin transaction without paying any fees. If a transaction has been sent with a very low or 0 fee being offered, it can be ignored from the next block and perhaps the next block and so on. So this is why if the network is really busy, your wallet software automatically might increase this number, so you might be paying more than generally what you are paying. So for this reason, for instance, in the case of Ethereum, when the network is busy, NFT minters wait for the network to slow down and then mint their NFTs and so on to pay less transaction fees. To prove the ownership, Alice includes script seek to her transaction script. Okay. To transfer the ownership to Bob, her transaction includes Bob's public key, which is called secret pub key. So actually, traditional Bitcoin transactions consist of two parts, where you're unlocking your Bitcoins, which are transferred to in previous blocks. Then you're locking it by providing Bob's public key, saying that now the owner is this person. Okay. So here the misconception is that you do not send this cryptocurrency, you just change the ownership of it on the blockchain. This is important. A transaction actually says that now the owner is this person. Okay. So you don't receive to your wallet or keep it in your laptop or something like that. That is the main misconception. So every full node user of the blockchain needs to be notified that a transaction has taken place. To simplify the process, you just need to tell a small selection of nodes that your Bitcoin client is connected to. These nodes, in turn, tell the nodes they are connected to, and so on. So whenever you install Bitcoin core software, generally you connect to like 5 or 8 clients, okay? So, and generally in the network, there are thousands of nodes, maybe 2,000 or 3,000. So you only announce your transaction to like 8 people. But in turn, that 8 node also notify other 8 nodes and so on and so forth. So for instance, if you look at this web page, you can look at the current client status of a Bitcoin node. Here you can see relay fee is 1 Satoshi per byte. So this means that they're not accepting anything less than this, okay? And this also means that if you offer 2 Satoshi per byte, most probably miners will include that in their mining block. So as you can see, in the disk, it is huge. In the RAM, it is still manageable. So you can also use your laptop as a this kind of client, and it is connected to 127 peers here. Okay. So if you look at the recent blocks, you can see how many transactions occurred in that block, and size of that block. As you can see, this is larger than 1 megabyte. This is again due to SegWit upgrade, which allowed theoretically 4 megabytes of blocks. Okay. And here you can see the solution of the mining puzzle, which starts with a lot of zeros, and the time that is announced. Also, another thing I should go back, whenever you announce a transaction, actually you notify the clients you are connected to. In turn, they're also notifying other clients, and some clients record the IP address of the node that they sent this transaction to them. But some people misunderstand this, so they think that that IP address belongs to the person who created the transaction, but actually it is not, okay? So in blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain, we don't record the IP address. No IP address is recorded on the blockchain. This is very important because forensics people mistake this IP address with the person who created the transaction, okay? So this is just some clients record the IP address of the client that they heard the transaction from, and that's it. So this is important because, again, in forensics, you cannot use that IP address. And if somebody wants to hide their steps, most probably they are using Tor and so on. Okay? So that IP address wouldn't mean anything. So again, from that web page, I just took the screenshot of the mempool. So if you connect right now, most probably it will be a lot different. So here you see all of the transactions they heard that are waiting in the mempool. And it shows that average bytes are around 700. So transactions are generally around 700 bytes. And average fee is, at that time, 3 Satoshi per byte. So this means that, again, this is why they call it smart fee. This means that if you pay 4 Satoshi per byte, this means that most probably the miner will add your transaction to that block when they are mining. Okay. So here are the shortened version of all of the transactions and so on. So I'd recommend you to visit the web page to inspect all of this stuff. Okay. But as you can see, there are transactions waiting in the mempool, and miners are adding it to their block if they like the fee that is offered to them. Okay. Transaction lock time. This is important because almost nobody heard about it. Bitcoin has a transaction level time lock feature since the beginning. So Satoshi included it so that it might be used in smart contracts and so on. So transaction lock time is a transaction level setting, a field in the transaction data structure that defines the earliest time that the transaction is valid and can be relayed on the network or added to the blockchain. It is set to 0 in most transactions to indicate immediate provocation and execution. If unlock time is non-zero and below 500 million, it is interpreted as the block height, meaning the transaction is not valid and is not relayed or included in the blockchain prior to the specified block height. If it is above 500 million, it is interpreted as Unix epoch timestamp. A transaction with unlock time can be double spent before the lock time. So this is the idea. So you announce it, but delay it for a few days, for instance. And in the meantime, maybe you are transferring this money to somebody else, and in the physical world, you are expecting to buy something, okay? So during that time, if they don't give that physical thing to you, then you may respend it and take that money back to you. That is the whole idea, okay? So this is how you solve the Oracle problem in some sense, okay? So hidden messages in the blockchain. So a transaction might include some data fields where you can hide secret messages, okay? So this is one of the famous blocks, 666,666. Because all of them are sixes, so people try to add hidden messages in these blocks. For instance, if you look at one of the first transactions in this block, you can see that one transaction sends money to two addresses that start with as the vanity address God and Bible, because 666 is the number of the beast that is included in the Bible. Okay? As you can see, money is sent to these addresses, and there is actually a third address which is specified as null. So when the nodes see this line of code, they don't check the remaining signature, okay? So they return true due to this operator, as you can see. So you can write anything you want here, and none of the nodes will say that it is wrong, okay? So you can hide messages to this public script. And here, as you can see, you can send 0 Bitcoin to that address. So actually, you are not burning anything. In the initial days of Bitcoin, you couldn't do that. So most people sent money to, addresses that doesn't exist. So they actually burned that money, but hid a message inside the block. So if you take this message and put it inside the hex converter. So here I'm just converting hexadecimal values to ASCII, okay? Since it says decoded, some people think that I'm decrypting something. There is no encryption, as I mentioned before. Here, simply we copied this value in hexadecimal to our hex editor, and in ASCII mode, it says something, as you can see from the Bible. The verse number is here and so on. So this way you can actually hide messages. You can even encrypt something and put the encrypted version so that only the person who has the decryption key can decrypt it. So you can even hide encrypted messages here.